Hello, all you horror fans. Welcome to Horrifica, the horror channel that will satisfy all your spooky cravings. That doesn't sound weird in context at all. I know I've been gone for a week, but it was a holiday. I hope everyone had a nice, safe, and socially distanced Thanksgiving. Today, I'm hitting y'all up with another great list. This time, the best home invasion horror movies. And guys, if you like my channel, please consider subscribing so you don't miss out on any of my new content. Okay, let's get to the list. First up is one of my favorites, Youre Next. This movie is super crazy and fun, mostly because our protagonist is a literal badass instead of our average damsel in distress. And this will actually be a reoccurring theme for a lot of the ladies on this list today. For this movie, we have Erin, an intelligent survivalist expert. Guys, I can't even begin to tell you how cool it is to have this type of final girl who is self-sufficient and resourceful. She even sets traps, and she's the one who does the creative kills in this movie. Without spoiling anything, I will tell you my favorite scene in this movie involves a blender and a dude's head. And those of you who have already seen this know exactly what I'm talking about. With no spoilers being given, I can tell you 100% for sure that if you like a strong female protagonist who doesn't take any shit from anyone, then you will love Youre Next. Speaking of Next, the second movie on this list stars my favorite final girl currently in horror. And if you're a long-time watcher of this channel, you know I'm talking about Samara Weaving. And you also might know this movie, The Babysitter. This is a great Netflix comedy horror movie with some strong Home Alone vibes. So you know it's a good home invasion movie. It's got some Home Alone vibes to it. Because that's like the ultimate home invasion movie right there. Our protagonist is a young boy with a hot babysitter. That babysitter being Samara Weaving. He finds out that his babysitter has invited some people over while she's supposed to be watching him. His parents went away on a trip, and he heard some commotion downstairs when he couldn't fall asleep. We actually find out later in the movie that she slipped him something to see if he would fall asleep, but he never drank the alcohol that she gave him, so they were just playing around, and she's like, okay, you can try the alcohol, and she slipped something in it to make him fall asleep, but he never took it. He never drank it because the movie considers him a weenie. This is also a really nice coming of age story in its own right, in a very comedic way. Like he's really learning and growing himself throughout the whole film, which I think is nice. He had some good character development. So those people that are inside of his house turn out to be the best people when he witnesses them straight up murder a guy in his living room. This movie becomes a killer version of Home Alone when the boy has to resort to elaborate traps and tricks to kill his unwanted house guests before they kill him. This is such a fun movie with a great, stellar cast. Bella Thorne is even in it, and she is hilarious. It's so great to see her out in the world and away from the Disney scene because she does so well in horror movies. I think she found her new niche. Anyway, the next movie on this list is The Purge, and it is a classic. It's not really one of my favorite movies, but it's a great example of a home invasion with a crazy plot. So if you've ever seen The Purge or heard about The Purge, I mean, if you haven't, you've been living under a rock probably. It's basically, the premise is about a society that once every year they do this purge of their society. Basically, get all your bad urges out, you know? Go kill, steal, loot, thief, anything goes. Nothing will get you arrested, nothing will get you in jail. You can do anything for one night, including murder. So I think what really gets me about this movie is that it could possibly happen in reality, and if it did, it would be catastrophic. This whole series is just an interesting take on society, and it's a very eerie with how possible it could be someday. And I think that's the true point of the movie. Even when it comes down to it, the first movie in the series is just a crazy home invasion thriller movie. In the sense that the whole movie takes place in the family's house and their unwanted guests because they barricaded their house so they did not participate in the purge. They didn't want to. So if you didn't want to participate in the purge, you had to find a way to barricade yourself in your house. And they had this fancy home security system. They lived in an affluent neighborhood. and the father was very well off with his job. So they had this fancy security system, like way better than ADT or anything from nowadays. Like putting like stuff in front of the windows, like metal doors and everything like that. And there was a panic room and everything. But of course, the boy lets someone in the house, and that someone happens to be the person that the other affluent rich people of their neighborhood are hunting down like a dog for the purge. Because that's what knocks their rocks off. The movie's interesting and just it's trip. The ending is kind of shock factor, and I don't really care for it, but it's a fun watch if you want a good home invasion kind of movie with some interesting kill tactics, I suppose. So I had to put it on the list for that factor. The next one on my list is one of my favorite Netflix horror movies, and it is Hush. Hush is a really well written and interesting film about a deaf and mute woman who lives alone in the country, and she is at first being unknowingly hunted by a deranged killer. It becomes even more intense when she realizes that he is there and she must defend herself even though she cannot hear or speak. I really love how they portray the woman in the movie. She's intelligent and witty, and she has a writer's brain. She's a creative writer, so she can think of different scenarios before they even happen, play them out in her head, and she can figure out which one is the best. And she's also not afraid to fight back against this killer. She arms herself multiple times in the movie, and she's smart about some of her choices and her tactics. It's a refreshing thing to see. I also love that they don't treat her abilities like disabilities. As a teacher, I can tell you that we don't call anything like that a disability anymore, and if you do that, then you're not using the correct terminology, and it's hurtful or hateful to other people, so you should stop. And I'm glad that the movie portrays her so well and shows both the strengths and weaknesses of her as a person, and not just her being a weak person because she cannot hear or speak. Sometimes that comes to her advantage in the movie with certain things that she does to get the killer. I really appreciate that fact. I also really love how the movie is all seen from her perspective. Sans the one scene toward the end, but I don't want to spoil anything. That way we really experience what she is going through. It's much more visceral and immersive. It reminds me of the premise of A Quiet Place, and that sense of the movie mostly being told in a silent perspective. Mostly in The Quiet Place because they can't actually make noise, but it gets the point across that this movie is in a silent perspective. It makes everything more intense, and they do the exact same thing with Hush. It just makes for intense fight scenes and chase scenes, and the scenes where she's hiding and we really don't know what's happening around her. We can't hear anything, and we don't know anything about her surroundings until the camera pans out to different angles around her. So it makes it even more intense and suspenseful. It creates a jump scary kind of intense and suspenseful feeling without there actually being real jump scares, like the noises that you get from horror movies. I really am sick and tired of hearing the din in it kind of like noises, and then the movie goes silent and you know something's going to happen. Well, in this movie, it's always silent. So you never really know when something is going to happen, and it's intentional and it's meant to be there, and it's not just a placeholder to build up to build up that sense of fear or dread. The whole movie puts you in that sense of fear or dread. And I appreciate it for that. And I feel like that's a really great way to use this type of movie and to use this kind of character. And I just cannot recommend this movie enough. It is such an amazing watch, and I really, really love it. Like, The Babysitter and Hush, if you want some really good, great horror movies to watch right now in quarantine, get yourself on Netflix and go ahead and watch one of these because they're really good. Now, next on my list is When a Stranger Calls, and I'm talking about the original and not the questionably bad remake. This movie is a classic, and it's actually based off of a true crime as well. For context to this, there's a movie on Shudder. Not sponsored by Shudder, guys, but you know I would love to be sponsored by Shudder. and it is called Killer Legends, this movie, and it talks about the true story behind this movie and its counterpart to that. This movie, the When a Stranger Calls, going back to the actual movie that I'm talking about, this movie takes place in a house with a babysitter watching the kids. She gets a series of weird phone calls, she's bothered by them, and she phones the police, only to have the police trace the phone calls to a home line in the house and tell her that they're coming from the house. It's such a creepy movie, mostly because of how we know it's grounded in reality because it's based off of that true crime. So if you want an eerie, kind of creepy movie where you don't feel like being the babysitter alone in the house for a little while, then I definitely go for this one. And the next movie, the last movie on this list, I should say, Black Christmas. Also, again, I'm talking about the original and not the remake because just always assume I'm talking about the original if there's a remake out there unless I specify. This is another great home invasion movie, and it has the same kind of vibes as When a Stranger Calls, with some of the scenes of the phone coming from the calls coming from the house kind of thing. But it has a different main plot, and I also really like the ambiguous ending that this movie has. So, not to be any spoiler dropping here, not drop any spoilers, but sometimes I don't want my horror movies to have a sunshine and rainbows type of ending where the final girl has her happy moment. Sometimes leaving it open ended is honestly the best choice for the movie, and I feel like it works with Black Christmas. So if you want a good classic movie to go watch, this movie came out in the 70s. This movie was kind of a setup for a lot of slasher movies because people are like, oh, Halloween and Friday the 13th and all of these movies were the ones who really made slasher movies kick off. But you could argue that going even back to Psycho, that's really where it started. But you can argue that Black Christmas was really the movie that kicked off the slasher genre in the 70s because it came out before Halloween did. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed these great home invasion horror movie picks. If you like this channel and its content, then please give this video a like, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing. Hit me up in the comments down below if you think there's a movie on this list that I missed that you think should be here. Everyone have a great rest of your day, and until next time.